Indeed, you're watching Good Morning Kenya. This is Eye on Politics. My name is Mike. Remember, this is where we talk about politics and everything in between, just to get a pass of what is happening in the country. And to start us off, we'll take you through what is making headlines in our local dailies. I will start with the Daily Nation. Ruto stumbles from one crisis to another. President Ruto has weathered several storms since assuming power in 2022, but after navigating one crisis, another crops up, testing even more the foundation of his administration. That story is told on page 4 and 5 of the Daily Nation. Public schools demand fat bribes for new learners. Parents are complaining about fat bribes ranging from between 40,000 shillings to 100,000 shillings that head teachers are demanding to admit new learners in public schools. Read that story on page 2 of the Daily Nation. Joho dragged into Turkana gold mines feud. CS on the spot over irregular issue of licenses. That story is told on page 8 of the Daily Nation. Oil dealers inflate cooking gas prices by 3 times. Multinational oil marketing companies are raking in billions in profits from the sale of tax-free cooking gas, even as consumers pay exorbitant prices. That story is told on page 7 of the Daily Nation. The Standard is carrying a story here, and this is what is captured on the front page of the Standard. RSF's tragic mission. A Kenyan pilot was killed in an attack by the Sudanese army at an airstrip controlled by the rebel Rapid Support Forces in northern Sudan. The pilot was reportedly on a covert mission supplying personnel and military hardware to the RSF, a revelation that risks tarnishing Kenya's image for a nation celebrated for its role in mediating regional conflicts and often dubbed an island of peace. The operation, linked to senior government officials, amounts to an embarrassing own goal in a volatile conflict. That story is told on page 4 of the Standard. Mothers speak, pain, power, and the plea for dignity in delivery rooms. As the world honors mothers, Kenyan women share harrowing tales of childbirth, neglect, courage, and hope, demanding dignity, safety, and compassion in hospitals where motherhood begins and too often is nearly lost. On the front page of the Star, Safaricom injecting 1.2 trillion shillings to economy. They read that story on page 4 and 5 of the Star newspaper. Treasury CS in trouble with senators for snubbing invite. That story is told on page 2 of the Star newspaper. Now, my guests are already in studio. I'm joined by George Kithi, who is an advocate of the High Court. Thank you for making time.
Thank you, good morning.
And also Omar Thomas, who is a political scientist. Karibu sana.
Thank you, Mike.
And also Abdi Hakim Bishar, who is a strategic political analyst. Karibu sana.
Thank you, Mike.
I want to get a feel of your sentiments regarding these headlines. And let me start with you, Akili. And the first headline here is on the Standard, RSF's tragic mission. A Kenyan pilot was killed in an attack by the Sudanese army at an airstrip controlled by the rebel Rapid Support Forces in northern Sudan. What's your take?
From the headline and the news in the Standard is that the pilot was on a mission that was interactive with RFC, obviously noticed by the military, and therefore there was an execution, a military execution to his person and to the plane. It means it was deliberately targeted. Yeah. So issues emerging there, as matters stand now, is that was a Kenyan pilot and a Kenyan registered plane that had gone to a war zone for purposes of interactive sessions, basically what we call in law transaction of whatever nature it was. What is also being portrayed by that news is that the covert mission was to deliver certain military tools of trade for RFC, which has not been verified. Of course, this will continue to emerge as a story, both interest locally and internationally. In a place where a war is raging, such as in Sudan, no country has a right to take a position unless it is threatened by that position or what is going on in that country. The right, therefore, is limited to humanitarian issues and issues that do not fuel the conflict. But again, a country will participate, such as we've seen in the Great Lakes and in Rwanda, DRC, Uganda conflict, if then a right of hot pursuit in international law crystallizes, which is not the case in Kenya, for it to participate. That definitely seems to be a civilian pilot and not a military pilot. And therefore, we can't say Kenya was engaging in active combat or basically military activities. But then it raises the question of Kenya's neutrality in the dispute and its position in regard to the dispute between RFC and the military. It's an issue that will take both political positions and also the trade issues will come in. And more importantly, what is Kenya's interest in RFC will come under heavy scrutiny in the near future. It may take time before a position is taken internationally, but when an authentic international authority gives a position later, I don't think it will be good for Kenya because that must be a damning report. The effect may not be immediate because it takes a lot of time, sometimes years, for a report to come out. But when it does, I think it will be a damning report against Kenya and its leadership.
All right. Omar, what do you think? Will it affect the relations between the two countries?
Mike, when we have a look at the constitutive act of the African Union, we get that countries are prohibited from meddling in other countries' affairs. A few months ago, we saw what happened here in Nairobi, at to be specific, the Kenyatta International Conference Center, whereby Nairobi hosted the RSF rebels who are trying to come up with an alternative government. And now, I just woke up to the sad news that one of our own was killed in Sudan in what has been described as delivering military ammunition to the RSF in Sudan. When countries engage at a global scale, they do so to serve their national and state interests. That is what Professor Joachim Hans Morgenthau, who is the father of modern diplomacy and also international relations, tells us. This gentleman has written extensively on international relations, and part of his writings are found in the Politics Among Nations. So he tells us that when countries react, they do so to serve their national state interest and not personal and commercial interests. As Wakili has put it forthrightly, I like to understand what's Kenya's interest in Sudan. Initially, we had commercial interests before these conflicts, whereby Kenya was exporting her tea to that region. But after this conflict, that deal was cancelled. And as far as I'm aware, over 1,000 Kenyans at the packaging and processing factory in Mombasa lost their jobs because of this conflict. So I think what's happening in Sudan is a conflict that I can say has been fueled by personal and also commercial interests. Because as a country, I don't really think whether we have anything to do with that particular conflict. Because at one particular point, we have the military generals who at one point deposed the military dictator then, Omar al-Bashir, and another part, the RSF, that are fighting for power in that region. So as the constitutive act of the African Union tells us, as a country, we have no right at all, Mike, to meddle in the affairs of other countries. You see, this has greatly soiled our diplomatic standing, especially in the East African region, whereby initially Kenya was seen to be a regional hegemony. It was during the regime of President Uhuru Kenyatta, whereby Kenya got a position at the United Nations Security Council. And I remember at that particular point, Kenya was fighting for that position with Djibouti, and we won. Recently, Kenya was fighting for the position of the African Union Commission chairmanship, and we lost that position, Mike. And it was at this particular seat where I say that we were going to lose that position because of the manner in which we were handling our foreign policy issues. You can see what happened in the Democratic Republic of Congo the other day. We hosted Colonel Nanga, who is part and parcel of the M23 rebel group. So I really believe that we need to have a seat and check on the manner in which we are handling our diplomacy and also foreign relations. Because what's happening is very pathetic, and I believe it will take us ages, if not years, for us to rebuild our lost glory in as far as diplomacy is concerned.
Bishar, what do you make of this? I ask you the same question. Is this going to affect the relations between Kenya and Sudan?
Just before that, I think when looked at specifically on this pilot, the fate of this pilot as well as the plane, we can say that the pilot went there on his own, accord on his own endeavors. Generally speaking, when countries are in conflict, you will have logistics access, on humanitarian grounds. As far as there's no direct connection to the Kenyan government, I think there's no problem with the with the plane being registered in Kenya. It can basically go to Sudan, operate in parts of Sudan on humanitarian grounds, considering that we know the state of Sudan at present. However, I think when looked at holistically in terms of the the backdrop series of allegations against the country, I think then that is something that we need to look at and see, as my colleague said here, exactly what is Kenya's interest in this whole contestation. Remember also that countries basically look after their interests.
Yes.
If it is seen that supporting one entity against others serves the Kenyan interest, that is something I think the government will probably be looking at. However, at what cost? That's, for example, somebody has just said about the AU's Constitutive Act. Overall, I think we just need to balance our foreign policy, specifically with regards to Sudan, as well as the actors that are basically foiling this conflict. In one way or another, we are seeing that the government of Sudan, the Port Sudan-based government, is becoming a little bit stronger military-wise. It has also got the support of some significant countries. I think the more we are intertwined, the more we are mingled into the chaos in Sudan, I think the damage it does to the image and the brand of Kenya as a peacemaker in the region.
Indeed. The front page of the Daily Nation is talking about the president stumbles from one crisis to another. Ruto stumbles from one crisis to another. President Ruto has withered several storms since assuming power in 2022, and actually they have tabulated the crisis here. Budget showdown and opposition to new taxes, uproar over IEBC nominees, row with governors on county cash, a two-faced Raila Odinga, growing opposition to broad-based government. And it's a tabulation of several things that have or are seen as crises facing the Kenya Kwanza government. I will start with you. What do you think of this? Are we going to see moving away from what is seen as stumbling blocks to government operation or operating smoothly?
Personally, I will say the genesis of the challenges, the multiple challenges that's facing the current government goes back to the previous Uhuru government. You remember largely what Kenya talks about are basically about the state of economy, the difficulty of doing business here in the country, the lack of youth employment, etc. What we have seen with Gen Z.
Yes.
I think you cannot squarely blame the current predicament that the country is facing squarely on the government of President Ruto. Considering it's about 3 years old now. This has been basically economic problems that have been making for the last 10 years. And I think a huge share of the blame will have to go to President Uhuru regime. Basically, they're the ones who laid some of the challenges that we're now seeing this president and this government facing. With regards to the government stumbling from one crisis to another, I think that it needs to be viewed relatively. Exactly on what basis? We know if you are talking about, for instance, Gen Z, we know those are economic issues that are not necessarily, exclusively, under the responsibility of Ruto's government. It goes way beyond. If you're looking at for example, at the IABC, for instance, is also something that is funded by the fallout within the Kenya Kwanza government. If we know that the impeachment process, the divorce between former Deputy President Gachagua and Ruto, that is now feeding into the tension within IABC. But my thinking is that the IABC, in whichever government, will always be contentious. What is important is that does it reflect the face of Kenya? Does it show the fabric of the Kenyan society to a large extent? If so, then you have got a foundation in which we can build and make progress towards electoral process. Thank you.
Wakili, what do you think of this? Because one of the things that the paper is talking about is public disquiet over CSA's performance. Is that seen as one of the stumbling blocks for the government?
Well, you see that it's perceptive. It's perceptive and also analytical. And I would also agree with that descriptive part of what the regime would constitute, that there's an element of firefighting from one issue to another, and then obviously they onboard another issue continuously like that. I have probably a different view of looking at it. President Ruto comes with his leadership style. So did Uhuru Kenyatta and Mwai Kibaki, if you look at the very recent presidencies that we have probably been subjected to, enjoyed or suffered. You can enjoy and suffer in equal measure. But let me put it this way. I think President Ruto has adopted a centralist approach to leadership, that everything starts and stops with him. And therefore the imaging is that when you do that, you take responsibility over everything that happens in a contextual environment that is both political, economic, social, and all the variables that come with it. I say that because I think Uhuru Kenyatta picked a quasi-centralist approach. He will take responsibility, but at times he will be seen to delegate, and therefore the quantity of blame would otherwise be spread across the government spectrum. Obviously, the buck stops with him because he appoints his government. But then the perceptive part, which I was talking about, is what informs elements and renditions such as the return that we get from the nation today. President Kibaki, on the other hand, was not a centralist at all. So all power was seen to be exercised by probably his ministers and delegation that he made at that time, delegated power. And therefore, the likes of the Michukis will take a blame and take a stand on it. Of course, a government stand, but the perceptive issues on failure or successes will be distributed across the board and therefore give him a political position. President Moi took both. He would be a centralist, but again, distribute powers, and he had quite powerful ministers as at the time, as we will remember. The reason for that is then the likes of Mulu Mutisias and Nasirs will take a position, communicate to the public, then there will be public uproar. Then he will be able to come and probably stem in with purposes of correcting a public policy that otherwise would have painted the government in a certain way. And he would be able to survive over and over the political times that were more tumultuous than it is today. Because remember, there was the, the multi-party approach and, reform that took its height during his time and the Clarion Cause. I remember during a student activism at the time. So fast forward to where we are today, why that position? Because it has a historical comparative issue to it, and he takes a centralist approach to issues. And therefore he must agree that if he wants to be a powerful president, he will take also the blame on liability and on account of what the government will prescribe as its obligation to discharge responsibilities and duties to the public. What I foresee, therefore, is that if the success in government, which is ordinarily far and apart, because to satisfy an entire public of over 50 million people will be very high. But then if you are good enough to be successful, eventually it comes with you. But even if you're not a centralist, the success will still go with you on a historical times in future, probably completely indelible in the minds of history, in the books of history. So I say this, that he again is a decisive president, I must say.
Yes.
He takes a position, good or bad. If it's bad, of course, he runs with it. Like, the budget, he was very, very grandstanding into saying the budget has to be done because we have things to do as Kenyans and as a government, which was right. But of course, the question, the dynamic position there was, do we tax to develop or do we allow people to have money and develop? Because then there is a natural process through which we need to develop. So do we force development as an immediate crisis we have, or do we allay that and let people, put money into the pockets of people and allow society to evolve over time? And those schools of thought, I think he adopted the robust one to say, I must shine with it, I must be seen to have done it, I have no time, I only have probably a few years to the 5th year and determine my first term. If I get a second term, probably I'll have, that's a very short time period, because you see, we have decades and centuries of other societies having developed to showcase what they are as of today. Okay. So what I prescribe to say today is that I don't think, I think it's a return because of how he's packaged himself in his leadership, a style that he probably has adopted. I don't think he can change now that he's reached there. But yes, that return validly is a perceptive return among many Kenyans.
Okay. Omar, what do you think of this? Granted, yes, there are crises. How do you think should the government, going forward, handle them? Those that crop up along the way?
This is my take on that, Mike. Number one, Article 3.2 of our Constitution is very crystal clear, and Wakili can agree with me on how a government should be formed. This particular article clearly states that how a government should be formed, and any other way that a government is formed that is out of the Constitution is unlawful. Here we have an opposition political figurehead in the name of Raila Amolo Odinga, who in his own terms has said that he has given some 5 experts to the regime of Kenya Kwanza, so that these experts can assist President William Ruto in running the government. But what was the initial position of the Kenya Kwanza regime? They had a manifesto which they had told Kenyans that this is what we are going to do to you as Kenyans. But in the middle of the way, we see President William Ruto closely working with the opposition figurehead in the gaze of delivering to Kenyans. This is where the challenge comes in. I want to give you an example. A few months ago, during the Adani conversations, I remember in the morning, the energy CS, James Opio Wandai, was in a particular place in Kericho, trying to talk how good that deal was. Then later on in the evening, the president cancelled the deal. So there was a double speak. So why is it that the greatest problem and the greatest challenge that we have as a country is the problem of political hygiene? and also in discipline. Why is it that those who lose elections, why can they wait for another 5 years so that if they convince the population, they can also form a government? So we have the government working with the opposition with conflicting ideas, then there is that conflict of interest.
So in other words, these are problems of their own making.
Exactly, Mike. You see, like for example, President William Ruto, as I know him, is one of the most intelligent politicians around. And I can say that no single politician in this country has mastered the art of identity politics than President William Ruto. So that is, as you can see, is currently in a serious campaign mode. He's on top of vehicles. He's moving from county to county, telling Kenyans what his government is doing and what it has not done. So what I can see is that the president is on a campaign mode for 2027, unless anyone has a contrary opinion. And recently there were conversations about extension of term limits. You know, the other day, President Duma Gideon Boko of Botswana said that if you see a head of state saying that he wants to extend a term limit, then most probably that is a failure. Why should President William Ruto and his political lieutenants want to extend the term limits while the Constitution gives them a term of 5 years so that they can work to Kenyans? The bottom line remains that we have a problem of political hygiene, whereby the opposition is working with the government, and yet the government has its agenda to deliver, and the government is unable to deliver because those that the government is working with hold a contrary opinion and expectations of the same government. Yeah.
Indeed. That is basically what is captured on, just a feel of what is captured on the front page of our local dailies. When we come back, we talk more on the court ruling that was given by the Court of Appeal on Friday regarding the lack of constitutional authority by the Deputy CJ, that is Philomena Mwilu, on matters to do with impeachment of former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua. We take a short break, we'll be right back.